Welcome everyone. This is second part with Dr. Gregore Mielke, and we are continuing our discussion about physical activity and life transitions and socioeconomic factors. In the first part, we discussed about patterns of physical activity across the lifespan for prevention of chronic diseases and the differences between low and middle income countries. So if you haven't listened to the first part yet, you might want to check it out first. In this part, we will be discussing, for example, physical activity and life transitions to adulthood. So Gregor, should we start this episode with the physical activity and transition to adulthood? What kind of studies you have done and what have you found in your studies?
So thanks, Ollie. I can share with you one recent study that we conducted using data from one of the Pelotas birth cohort studies. So basically, in this study, that includes everyone that was born in Pelotas, that is a medium-sized city in extreme south of Brazil. That's where I'm from. So that includes nearly 5,000 participants or that were born in the city in 1993, and they are followed since then. Specifically for this study that is going to be published, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks, we look at the relationships between device-measured physical activity at age 18, physical activity at age 22, and metabolic profile at age 18 and age 22. So basically, we had physical activity, device measured physical activity, and metabolic profile at age 18, and also these measures 4 years later in this sample of Brazilian adolescents, young adults, depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
So basically what we look is how much physical activity declined. We observed how much metabolic profile improved or got worse, and how much, and we observed the relationships between these declines in physical activity and change in metabolic profile. So our main finding was, or the main findings were, one, as expected, device measured physical activity declines from age 18 to age 22. So if we think about non-bounded physical activity, so movement overall without considering for how long, that there is a decline both in men and women. And these declines, they reflect on change in metabolic profile. So basically, the metabolic profile from age 18 to age 22, the metabolic profile gets a little bit worse. Or you have a change in the metabolic profile, so more higher blood pressure, overall, not only this but higher blood pressure, higher body body fat mass, glucose, and metabolic profile overall. Sorry, I just got lost in translation here.
Yeah, no worries.
So, and then that was the first finding, was to understand how much physical activity changed and how much metabolic profile changed. And then we look how much actually physical activity at age 18 and change in physical activity, they predict metabolic health at age 22. One of the questions that we had was, okay, and that is still related to what we discussed in the first part. So if you were very active at age 18 and you maintain your level of physical activity, okay, we know that probably that is good for your health. But what if you were active and you decrease your activity level, or what if you were inactive and then you increase, how
mm,
this plays a role on metabolic health. So for this study, the main finding was that physical activity at age 18 was an important predictor of metabolic profile and change in metabolic profile at age 22.
mm,
But actually, change in physical activity were a stronger predictor of metabolic profile at age 22. So, in other words, is for metabolic profile, the amount of physical activity that you do now seems to be more important than the amount of physical activity that you did in the past. So
mm,
this is really important in terms of health promotion as well, because it just reinforced the message that, okay, you still have time to do physical activity, and you still can do physical activity. And if you do physical activity now, even though that you haven't done anything in the past, you still can accumulate health benefits.
mm,
In this case, metabolic profile. So this is one
mm,
finding. One thing that was interesting, and that really we need more research to explore more about that actually, is that these findings, they were really really clear in men, but they
mm,
were not as clear in women. So for men, that was like the relationships were very, very beautiful, everything that we would expect, like linear associations and every like. But with women, that is very, very unclear yet. So it seems that we have the same pattern that we observe in men, but the findings, they are much more. Um, they're not as clear as in men. So if you ask me why, I
mm,
I can't give you an answer right now, because that is something that needs further research, definitely.
mm. And you said that the physical activity at 22 years old was bigger predictor of the metabolic profile. So how fast these markers of metabolic profile are responding? Like blood pressure probably is quite quickly responding to your physical activity level, which makes sense. And also it takes some time for the fat mass to respond, but it's also quite fast. Do you have some markers that are kind of slowly responding, and was there any difference within these?
Um, no, we haven't looked yet at individual markers. We look at metabolic profile. Actually, we look at the metabolic profile excluding individual markers one each time. So uh, we look at the metabolic profile, for example, excluding body fat mass, excluding glucose, and so on. And there was no change. Like the pattern of association was the same. Uh, what we want to do now, actually, that is, we intend to start that in a couple of weeks now, is to look at individual markers. That is, and also look at other aspects or aspects of physical activity, including um, not only volume of physical activity, that was what we did here, but looking at different intensities and
Mm,
different bout durations of physical activity. So trying to compare people that accumulate, let's say, 100 minutes or 150 minutes per week with more structured physical activity, and with people that accumulate that with more like incidental physical activity.
mm,
So that is something that we are starting now. Actually, we haven't started. We are going to start in 2 3 weeks. So um, that is
mm,
one question that we still have, definitely. So
mm,
which component of the metabolic profile respond quicker, or um, and
mm,
and then again, which pattern of accumulation of physical activity is more important, let's say, for uh, uh, glucose control or for body composition. So it might be, for example, that's just I'm making up, but it can be, for example, that for body composition, it's better to do physical activity um, like 30 times 30 sessions of 1 minute. But for
Mm,
glucose, it's better for you to do one session of 30 minutes. So
mm.
continuous, like, yeah, that is
Yeah,
some thing.
yeah, that will be interesting. Like, for example, that is light intensity activity more related to fat mass, for example, because it's probably an energy expenditure. But then you have
Mhm.
some markers which are more about kind of fitness. So it's probably just higher the intensity, more you have responses. For example, I would guess in blood pressure. So have you created any hypothesis yet for these? What do you expect to see?
I don't know yet in terms of health outcomes, honestly. The only thing that my hypothesis or things that I believe, or how can I say
Mm,
that,
yeah.
is that I'm still not convinced. Uh, I'm still not 100% convinced by the argument that was made for the current physical activity guidelines on removing the 10-minute bouts. I understand why they removed. I don't think that we have evidence that says anything related to the 10-minute bouts. I get that. I agree with that. But the message that we have that uh, doing one block of 10 minutes is similar to doing 10 blocks of 1 minute. I don't think that that's the case. I
Mm,
I think that that might be different for some health outcomes that are related to energy expenditure, for example, body uh, or fat mass, might be
mm,
just related to volume of physical activity. So you can do that as many times, but for some outcomes like glucose, where you have a physiological response, um, I think that it might be related to the duration of the bout as well. But as I said, that is a guess. That's not. That's something that we will only be able to see in the future.
mm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you bring up, and there's probably a difference when we look at, like, for example, just uh, just the health risks in general, and maybe it's kind of gets averaged out, but probably like doing a 1 10 minute or let's say 30-minute bout is improving your fitness more than doing 31-minute bouts where your heart rate doesn't go up. And especially in relation to
Yeah,
this Holterman studies, that if you just do 8 hours of physical activity in your work, you might still have a really bad fitness if you don't get your heart rate up. So yeah, but of course this is about how do we message to public what this, we need to make it simple, so we cannot make the story too complicated, even there's a difference.
yeah, yeah. And actually, this is a really topical research topic because, and the main reason for that is because now we have physical activity measures that allow us to look at these different patterns actually, because for years all the evidence that we had were based on self-report um, measures of physical activity, that they are really good. I do like them, but they were good to give us a big picture of physical activity levels of the population and what people do. But now, when we have device measured physical activity, when we have high resolution data, so we
Mm,
can even detect some patterns of movement that are actually, we can kind of replicate laboratory studies into population based studies. So basically, one of the concepts that Andreas was working on, and Professor Stamatakis
mm,
on that. They changed the name now, but the original name of the framework that they were working, the HIPAA, the
mm,
high intensity incidental physical activity, that was pretty much based on that idea on HIIT, or high intensity interval training.
mm,
So, and that is possible to be detected because we have high resolution data now. So we can see people that did this kind of a pattern of high intensity interval training, not necessary training, but in a
mm.
daily life. So,
Yeah.
and I think that in the future, in the next years, we're going to see a lot of good quality evidence on these different patterns of accumulation of physical activity.
Mm. Yeah, I like the concept that Stamatakis have introduced and their group. I think it's a really nice idea for people who don't, for example, have time to exercise as such, but just kind of include some high intensity things in climbing the stairs or carrying something heavy. So I really like the idea. And if we go back to
Yeah.
a little bit to this, yeah, please go on.
I know. I would say, and that for in terms of public health message, that's really important because people, they want to know what's the best exercise, what's the best thing that they can do. Um, before I become before 10 years ago, I guess, when in my other life I was a fitness instructor.
Yeah.
uh, I worked a couple of years as a fitness instructor, and at that time, and I'm pretty sure that that is still the situation. The main question that I received from my clients was, okay, what's the best exercise to X? So, what can I do? I want to improve X body composition. I want to improve fitness. I want to decrease my glucose levels, whatever. So, that kind of a statement was always followed by, what's the best exercise? What's the best I can do? So, how can I
Mm,
optimize my exercise, my physical activity routine? So, and that's why, that is what fascinates me about this field, is kind of, okay, now we have data uh, and we can look at these different patterns and put all together. So becomes a kind of a little bit messy, but patterns of physical activity in different life stages, different
mm,
patterns of physical activity, daily life patterns of physical activity as well.
mm. And probably from the research, we cannot say that the one exercise would be the best. But if you would need to reply, like somebody would asking, what is the best exercise? I don't have too much time to exercise. I want to be fit. What's the best one? What would you say?
Yeah, 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 definitely. I think that's how I see the future. So people will have knowledge. We will have knowledge to um empower people to have to take their own decisions based on the data that we have. So we might be able to say, for example, oh, okay, you can do 20 minutes of running or this exercise, or you can do 10 minutes of this one, or you can do 5 minutes of that one, and you might have, probably you have the same health benefit. So then you create choice for people. You create choice so people can look, okay, I don't like the 20 minutes, but I do like the 5 minutes.
Mm,
That might be me. And then you might say, oh, I would rather go for the 20 minutes, and so on. So then you create choice for people, and people are, I think, they are more likely to do a physical activity when they have choice, when they have choice that fit their life periods, their life constraints, and um, so fit their time and everything else.
mm. You as an old 400-meter runner, so probably the best exercise is to run 400 meters full speed, right?
Oh, it depends. Now, my best exercise is playing soccer, or trying to play soccer, because it's still a little bit intense, and it's the time of the week that I can see my friends and socialize, and have a chat after that. So it's kind of a yeah, or go for my long run, not long runs. I can't go to long runs anymore because I just get disappointed.
Yeah, yeah. But let's say that for a 400-meter runner, like 2 kilometers is a long run in a way.
Indeed, yes, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
But
So yeah,
yeah, so I think that our
yeah. And
task as researchers.
sorry, please go on.
Oh, sorry. No, I'd say our task as researchers, physical activity researchers, is to generate the best evidence that we have available and make it and generate the best evidence possible and make that available. So then people have choice to become active.
Mm,
I Something that really annoys me in our field sometimes is that we and that's a critic that I do myself as well. We know everything about physical activity, and then when we want to promote physical activity, we just say the same thing for people. Oh, just go for a walk, for example. Some people love that, some people hate
mm,
that. So if someone tells me, oh, go for a walk, I say, oh, no way, I don't have any, I don't like that.
yeah,
So
yeah. I can see that. And so you have been studies related to physical activity in different parts of life. And what is the best age to be active based on your research findings?
I'd say the best age to be active is the age that you are now, regardless of the age that you are. So, um, from what I've seen from my studies and from other studies, including studies from the Australian longitudinal study, from the Women's Health Study, from other studies that were conducted in the USA, in Brazil, and overall, I can see from the UK as well. Um, when you look at patterns of physical activity during the life course, it seems that that message that is never too late to become active. That is a really important message, and that's what happens. So when you compare people with different trajectories of physical activity, those that become active, they tend to be a little bit better off than those that became inactive. So even
Mm,
though, yeah, if you were that those people were inactive, if they were active in the past, it's better to be
mm,
active now.
mm,
um, we did a study here with health costs. So
yeah.
we look at physical activity levels or trajectories of physical activity over 12 years in women here in Australia. So from when they were in their 50s until they were in their 60s, and we look at physical activity in three different time points. And what we observed was that women that were constantly active, in this case, that were active in three time points,
Mm,
they have much lower health costs than those that were consistently inactive. But
mm,
we also observed that those women that were active in at least one time point, they had lower health costs and medical and pharmaceutical costs than those that were always inactive. And we kind of observed that those response relationship and more you were active, better, and in different time points as well.
mm. So basically, the current level of physical activity is important for your health, not what you did in the past.
I think that what you did in the past is we can't disregard that, definitely.
Mm,
I think that is still important, but the message I think is what you do now is really important. So if you haven't done anything in the past, that's okay. You still can accumulate health benefits If you did something in the past, that was great, but you still need to keep doing.
Mm. And how do you see the kind of role of having competence to be physical active, having fitness actually to be able to be active enough, and also about kind of learning the habits? Have you looked any of these factors when you look at the trajectories?
No, not actually. I haven't looked at any of these specific, like more behavioral change and understanding behavior in that perspective. I know that there are lots of research and lots of good researchers that are doing research in that specific field. So having a more behavioral approach and understanding the different stages of behavioral change.
Mm,
Personally, I haven't done much research in this specific field. So when I think about determinants, I look much more on social determinants than individual determinants of change or maintenance of physical activity.
yeah, I see. And what kind of practical tips or guidelines you would say from these studies, other than it's never too late to be active? What other take home messages you would give from these studies?
So I reinforce the idea from the guidelines. So something is better than nothing. Um, it's never too late. But for me, is doing something that you really enjoy as physical activity and that you keep doing. So um, you don't need to do a physical activity that you don't like, because if you do that, you're likely to stop that in a couple of weeks. Um, so the message is, we have evidence that shows that you can do pretty much whatever you want to do. You can play sports, you can do long walks, you can do short, high intensity exercise, you can play tennis, you can do a lot of different activities and still have benefits for health. So, um, again, we did a study here with mid-age adults where we look at participation in a range of recreational sports and activities and occurrence of hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. So basically, we look at adults that reported a list of 12, 13 recreational activities, including running, cycling, playing golf, tennis, swimming, and so on, at a recreational level, not a competitive level.
Mm,
And we observed that those that did something, they were much better off than those that haven't done anything. And
mm,
most importantly, we found that many different activities, they have they were associated with lower risk of hypertension, diabetes, and obesity as well. So there was some variation. Some activities, they were a little bit better than others for hypertension or obesity, let's say, but overall, the findings were really in that direction. So do whatever you want to do, and you have choice, and you can do whatever you want to. What would you enjoy doing?
mm. Yeah, so that's some great points there. We are closing 30 minutes mark, so we could start wrapping up this episode. Is there any other things you would like to bring into discussion, or any final remarks for this episode?
Just would like to thank you and everyone that is listening that now. I think it was a great discussion. I really enjoying talk about this topic, as you can see.
Yeah.
I still think that we have lots of research to do in this field, um, because now we are having more and more data available to understand that change in physical activity, to understand different patterns of accumulation of physical activity in terms of intensity, bout duration. We are having more data from low and middle income countries coming soon. So, but we still need research funding to do good research, because and therefore advocate for physical activity as an important aspect of prevention of non-communicable chronic disease. And
Yeah.
again, thank you for that. I'm really was happy to enjoy and participate that, and I
Yeah.
always like to have a chat about that. Definitely.
Yeah. My pleasure to have you. Thank you.